The Samsung S23 has just released and is paving the way for Samsung to take over Apple. And that's because of three main reasons, each getting more and more dangerous for Apple. Starting with, Samsung is copying Apple. Look at this S23, doesn't it look suspiciously like an iPhone? But of course it would. Samsung is simply doing what works. Same thing with high flagship prices. Curved borders and a simple finish might be what we associate Apple with, but in reality that's just what most people want in their phone. But there's more to this than just the design of the new phone. As you know, the S23 is basically the S22 with slightly better cameras and a better software. More on that later. Apple is also famously known for never changing their phones until the very last second, and Samsung might start following that path. This shift in strategy could change Samsung from that company who innovates to simply Apple, but better. It would be better because unlike Apple, Samsung doesn't apply this strategy all over the board. While the flagships are getting the don't change anything treatment, Samsung can keep innovating with their other series, see what works, and implement it next time in the flagships. Apple doesn't have this luxury. They can't test hardware because they only release a few phones every year, meanwhile Samsung is releasing dozens. And even though all this while it looked like the whole Android market was just lagging behind Apple, I have a different take. Samsung has reached where Apple wants to be. The iPhone 14 did not go well for Apple because the only real difference between the base and Pro model was the dynamic island. If you were to look at them from behind, they are the same phone. But Samsung has already solved that problem. Look at the base S23 and the S23 Plus again. Now look at the S23 Ultra. Samsung makes it clear who is using this phone. The pros. It even has a stylus pen, but honestly I don't think it's that useful. The difference in design is so drastic people would think it's a totally different phone line. Yet it's surprisingly comfortable. It's just curved enough to fit in your hands for long periods of time while still having that clean-cut finish. Samsung can make the different models feel different, while every iPhone feels basically the same. But I haven't talked about the most important issue here, and quite clearly the reason Apple still exists, their software. Apple software has always been top-notch, ever since the first iPhone. Samsung and Android on the other hand, not so much. They've always been trying to improve Android, but it just wasn't as good as iOS. Until now. Because of the release for Android 13, Samsung is finally catching up to Apple in software. Android 13 is way more pleasing to the eyes than iOS. It has as much attention to detail as iOS. Wanna hear a joke? Siri. OK Google is so much better. Coupled with Samsung's custom Android UI, I think Samsung finally has some hope in the software side. But there is still one thing Samsung can't replicate. Watch it here.